Alex Carter had always valued silence. After years spent as a combat medic in the military, silence wasn't just a respite. It was a shield. In the quiet, she could process the chaos, take stock of the world, and remind herself that life after service had its own kind of battles. On this particular afternoon, Alex walked the familiar trails of Greenstone Park, her boots crunching softly on the gravel path. The park was a sanctuary, a place where the hum of the city seemed to fade away, leaving behind only the rustle of leaves and the occasional burst of birdsong. She had moved to this small Midwestern town after leaving the military, drawn by its slow pace and close-knit community. But even in a quiet town, Alex's instincts had not dulled. She still noticed the small things: the jogger with the uneven gait, the stray dog lingering by the fountain, the sharp burst of laughter from the far side of the park where a group of men loitered near a bench. It wasn't the laughter itself that caught her attention, but the tone of it: cruel, mocking. Alex turned her head slightly, her sharp eyes scanning the group without making it obvious. 4 men stood there, their body language radiating an aggressive confidence. One of them, tall with a shaved head and a thick neck, gestured wildly as he spoke, the others laughing in response. Nearby, a young woman sat alone on a bench, visibly tense as she clutched her phone and glanced nervously at the group. It didn't take long for Alex to realize what was happening. The men were closing in, their voices growing louder. One of them leaned toward the woman, invading her space. Alex could hear snatches of their taunts now, sly insinuations about her being in the wrong part of town, and crude jokes that made the woman shrink into herself. Alex's grip on the strap of her backpack tightened. She wasn't the kind of person to stand by when someone needed help, but she also wasn't impulsive. Years of training had taught her to assess the situation, consider the angles. She sized up the men quickly. One bulky and overconfident, 2 wiry and restless, and the last young, maybe in his early 20s, his swagger betraying an overeagerness to prove himself. She stepped off the path and walked toward the group, her movements deliberate and calm. The woman's eyes darted to her, a flicker of hope breaking through her fear. The men noticed Alex too, their laughter cutting off abruptly as they turned to face her. "Afternoon," Alex said evenly, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone who was used to being listened to. The tall man with the shaved head, who seemed to be the leader, smirked. "What's this? Someone playing hero?" Alex didn't answer right away. She kept her gaze steady, her stance relaxed but ready. "She asked you to leave her alone?" It wasn't a question. Not really. Her tone made that clear. The leader's smirk faltered, replaced by a sneer. "This ain't your business." Alex took a step closer, her voice lowering. "It is now." The tension in the air thickened. One of the wiry men stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. "You think you're tough or something?" Alex's eyes flicked to him briefly before returning to the leader. "I think you're going to regret this if you don't walk away." For a moment, the group hesitated. Bullies often relied on fear, and Alex wasn't giving them any. But then the young one, eager to impress, no doubt, lunged at her. Alex moved instinctively, sidestepping his clumsy attack and twisting his arm behind his back in one fluid motion. He yelped in pain as she released him, shoving him back toward the group. The leader's face darkened. "Big mistake," he growled. They came at her all at once, a flurry of fists and snarls. But Alex had seen worse. Her movements were precise, efficient. She ducked a wild swing, driving her elbow into a ribcage. A kick to the knee sent another sprawling. When the young one tried again, she swept his legs out from under him with a calculated strike. It was over in less than a minute. The men lay scattered on the ground, groaning and cursing. Alex stood over them, her breathing steady, not a hair out of place. The young woman on the bench stared wide-eyed, her phone clutched to her chest. The leader struggled to his feet, glaring at Alex with a mix of rage and humiliation. "You're gonna regret this," he spat, clutching his side. "You don't know who you're messing with." Alex didn't flinch. "Neither do you." She turned to the woman, who nodded quickly and murmured a shaky, "Thank you," before hurrying away. Alex watched her go before glancing back at the men. They were already limping off, muttering to each other. But Alex didn't feel relief. The leader's parting words lingered in her mind, carrying a weight that couldn't be ignored. Something about the way they had acted, organized, deliberate, didn't sit right. This wasn't just a random group of troublemakers. It felt bigger than that. As Alex left the park, her mind was already racing. Her instincts told her this wasn't over, and she had learned long ago to trust her instincts. The walk home from Greenstone Park was quiet, but Alex Carter's thoughts were anything but. The confrontation with the gang kept replaying in her mind. Their movements, their words, the strange symbols on their jackets. It all felt too deliberate to be random. By the time she reached her small, neatly kept house on the edge of town, she had already decided she couldn't let it go. The next morning, Alex sat at her kitchen table, a cup of coffee growing cold in front of her. She had spent most of the night piecing together her thoughts. The leader's parting words still hung in her ears. You don't know who you're messing with. It wasn't the kind of thing said by someone who thought of themselves as just another thug. He believed in something bigger, something dangerous. She logged onto her laptop and began searching for any reports of harassment or violence in the area. It didn't take long to find unsettling patterns. Over the past few months, there had been an uptick in incidents, mostly verbal harassment, but a few reports of vandalism and physical confrontations. The targets were consistent: people of color, immigrants, or anyone perceived as outsiders. Many of the reports described groups of men who acted with confidence, as if they didn't fear consequences. One particular story caught Alex's attention. A local journalist named Ellie Nguyen had written a blog post about the rising tensions in the community, linking the incidents to an organization called Vanguard Initiative. The group presented itself as a community improvement effort, but Ellie's article suggested it was a front for something far more sinister. Determined to learn more, Alex reached out to Ellie through an email address listed on her blog. Within an hour, she received a reply. Ellie was interested in meeting and suggested a coffee shop downtown. The message ended with a note that made Alex's pulse quicken. You're not the first to notice this, but it's dangerous to dig too deep. Be careful. The coffee shop was a cozy, bustling space filled with the hum of conversation and the aroma of fresh pastries. Alex found Ellie at a corner table, typing furiously on her laptop. She was younger than Alex had expected, maybe in her early 30s, with dark eyes that carried both exhaustion and determination. You must be Alex, Ellie said, standing to shake her hand. Thanks for reaching out. Thanks for meeting me, Alex replied, sitting down. I read your article. It lines up with what I saw yesterday. Ellie leaned forward, her curiosity piqued. Tell me everything. Alex recounted the events in the park, from the group's taunts to their organized behavior. Ellie listened intently, occasionally jotting notes in a small notebook. When Alex mentioned the symbols on their jackets, Ellie's expression darkened. That's their mark, Ellie said. Vanguard Initiative uses it to identify their members. It's not just a gang, it's a network. They're tied to harassment, intimidation, and even property takeovers. Alex frowned. Property takeovers? Ellie nodded. Their tactics are calculated. They target neighborhoods they want to reclaim, drive out the residents through fear, and then their backers swoop in to buy the properties cheap. It's a cycle. Who's behind it? Alex asked. That's the hard part, Ellie admitted. Vanguard Initiative operates in layers. The street-level members like the ones you encountered are just the tip of the iceberg. The real power lies with people like Blake Donovan, a real estate developer who funds them through shell companies. On the surface, he's a model citizen. Charitable donations, business awards, but he's pulling the strings. Alex felt a familiar surge of determination. How do we stop them? Ellie hesitated. It's not easy. The local police are either overwhelmed or unwilling to get involved, and the victims are often too scared to press charges. Without solid evidence, it's hard to hold anyone accountable. I don't scare easily, Alex said firmly. Ellie gave a small smile. I figured as much. That's why I'm going to help you. The two women spent the next few hours poring over Ellie's research. Together, they mapped out connections between Vanguard Initiative, local incidents, and Blake Donovan's business interests. It was a tangled web, but patterns began to emerge. Alex noticed something troubling: a series of donations from Donovan's companies to local officials and law enforcement initiatives. If Donovan had influence in the police department, it could explain the lack of action against Vanguard Initiative. Later that day, Alex decided to take her concerns to the police. She met with Officer Jake Morales, a detective with a reputation for fairness. Morales was in his early 30s, with sharp features and a no-nonsense demeanor. Alex laid out what she had seen and what she and Ellie had uncovered. Morales listened carefully, but his expression was guarded. "I've heard rumors about Vanguard Initiative," he admitted. "But without hard evidence, my hands are tied. And I'll be honest, not everyone in the department is eager to tackle this kind of thing." "What about you?" Alex asked. Morales met her gaze. "I want to do the right thing. But we need something concrete to get the ball rolling. Witnesses, documents, anything that ties this group to criminal activity." Alex left the station feeling both hopeful and frustrated. Morales seemed genuine, but the system he worked in felt slow and resistant. She returned home to find a text from Ellie. It was short and to the point. "Check this out. Things just got real." Attached was a photo of graffiti scrawled across the front of Ellie's house. The words were crude and threatening, warning her to stop writing about Vanguard Initiative. Ellie's message ended with a chilling line. "They know we're digging." Alex clenched her jaw. The gang wasn't just posturing. They were escalating. It was no longer just about intimidation. It was a battle, and Alex was ready to fight. The morning after Ellie's house was vandalized, Alex sat at her kitchen table with her laptop, her fingers scrolling through article after article. She was trying to make sense of the connections they had uncovered. Blake Donovan was at the center of it all, but there were still too many gaps in the picture. Vanguard Initiative wasn't just a random group of bullies. It was part of something larger, more coordinated. The attack on Ellie's home only confirmed that they were willing to escalate their tactics. Ellie arrived at Alex's house later that morning, her expression a mix of exhaustion and determination. She carried a small box of notes and USB drives. "If they think a little spray paint is going to scare me off, they're wrong," Ellie said as she dropped the box onto the table. "They're testing us," Alex replied. "They want to see if we'll back down. We can't give them what they want." Ellie nodded. "I brought everything I've got on Donovan and Vanguard Initiative. If we're going to stop them, we need to find something they can't deny." The two women spent hours sifting through the information. Ellie's research was meticulous. Names, dates, donations, and property transactions. They began connecting the dots, building a timeline of events that tied Vanguard Initiative to Blake Donovan's real estate ventures. The group's pattern was clear. Target a neighborhood, drive out its residents through harassment and fear, and buy up the property at discounted prices. But there was something else. As Alex reviewed one of the files, she noticed several transactions marked with red flags. They were payments to a logistics company she didn't recognize. "What's this?" Alex asked, pointing to the screen. Ellie leaned over to look. "That's one of the shell companies Donovan uses. They're supposed to handle construction materials, but the amounts don't make sense. Why would they need this much funding for basic supplies?" Alex's military training kicked in as she analyzed the data. The amounts were consistent with large-scale operations, but not construction. "They're funding something else," Alex said. "This isn't about building homes. It's about control." Before Ellie could respond, Alex's phone buzzed. It was a text from Officer Morales. The message was brief. "Need to talk? Come to the station." When Alex arrived at the police station, Morales was waiting in a small conference room. He closed the door behind her and gestured for her to sit. "I've been looking into Vanguard Initiative," he said. "You were right. This group is bigger than we thought." Morales placed a folder on the table and slid it toward Alex. Inside were photos of graffiti, reports of harassment, and police logs of disturbances across town. "We've had multiple incidents over the past year, but most of them were filed as isolated cases. No one connected the dots until now." "What about Donovan?" Alex asked. Morales sighed. "That's where it gets tricky. He's careful. His name doesn't show up directly in any of this, but his companies are involved. Without solid evidence, it's hard to make anything stick." Alex's frustration boiled over. "So we just let him keep getting away with it?" Morales leaned forward. "No, we're going to stop him, but we need more." "You said you had a lead on his logistics company?" Alex nodded. "Ellie and I found some suspicious transactions. It looks like they're moving money for something big. Then that's where we start, Morales said. But be careful. These people aren't afraid to get their hands dirty. Later that evening, Alex and Ellie followed their lead to a warehouse on the edge of town. The building was run down, with rusted walls and broken windows, but there were signs of recent activity. A few trucks were parked outside, and faint light glowed from inside. This has to be it, Ellie whispered as they crouched behind a stack of shipping containers. Alex scanned the area, her instincts on high alert. Stay here, she said. I'm going in. Be careful, Ellie said. Alex moved quietly, slipping into the warehouse through a side entrance. The interior was dimly lit, filled with crates and equipment that didn't match the profile of a construction company. She crouched behind a stack of boxes and listened. Voices echoed from a nearby room, and Alex crept closer to investigate. Through a crack in the door, she saw them. Two men stood over a table, examining documents and counting stacks of cash. One of them was Mitch Holloway, a name Ellie had flagged as a key member of Vanguard Initiative. He was burly, with a scar running down the side of his face. A man who looked like he thrived on intimidation. We moved this shipment tonight, Holloway said. The boss doesn't want any delays. What about the cops? The other man asked. They're sniffing around. Holloway snorted. Let them. They don't have anything. As long as Donovan keeps greasing the right palms, we're untouchable. Alex's stomach churned. This wasn't just about intimidation. The money, the shipments, Vanguard Initiative was funding something far more dangerous. She pulled out her phone and snapped a few photos of the scene. Just as she turned to leave, her foot brushed against a loose piece of metal, sending it clattering to the ground. Who's there? Holloway barked. Alex bolted, weaving through the crates as the men shouted behind her. She reached the side exit just as they gave chase, but her military training gave her the edge. She slipped into the shadows outside and circled back to Ellie. We have to go, Alex said, grabbing Ellie's arm. What happened? Ellie asked, her voice shaking. They saw me, Alex replied, but I got what we needed. The two women sped away, the glow of the warehouse fading in the distance. When they were safely back at Alex's house, she showed Ellie the photos. This proves they're running something big, Alex said. Holloway mentioned a shipment tonight. We need to tell Morales. Ellie nodded, her eyes wide with determination. This could be the break we've been waiting for. Alex didn't respond. She was already dialing Morales, her mind racing with what they had uncovered. The stakes were higher now, and the danger was real. But Alex knew one thing for certain. She wasn't backing down. Alex sat in the passenger seat of Officer Jake Morales's unmarked car, her hands gripping her knees as the vehicle sped toward the industrial district. After her call, Morales had moved fast, organizing a small team to intercept the shipment Mitch Holloway had mentioned. The stakes felt higher than ever. This wasn't just about harassment or vandalism anymore. It was about stopping a network that thrived on fear and power. We have to move carefully, Morales said, his tone steady but grim. If we spook them, they'll dump the evidence and vanish before we can make anything stick. They already know I'm onto them, Alex replied. We don't have much time. Morales nodded, his eyes fixed on the road. In the back seat, Ellie Nguyen clutched her camera bag, her fingers drumming nervously against the strap. This could be it, she murmured, almost to herself. If we catch them in the act, Donovan's whole operation unravels. When they arrived near the warehouse, the scene was eerily quiet. The dim glow of floodlights illuminated the parking lot, where a few trucks were idling. Morales parked a block away, and the group approached on foot, staying low and sticking to the shadows. Alex, you stay with me, Morales said, his voice a whisper. Ellie, you hang back. No heroics. Ellie gave a tight nod, though Alex could see the frustration in her eyes. Inside the warehouse, muffled voices and the metallic clang of crates being loaded onto trucks filled the air. Morales motioned for Alex to follow as they slipped through a side entrance. The smell of oil and damp wood was thick, and Alex's senses were on high alert. From their hiding spot behind a stack of crates, they could see Holloway directing a group of men as they loaded the trucks. One of them passed him a clipboard, and he began checking items off a list. Look at that, Morales whispered, pointing. That's evidence. Alex's heart raced as she spotted boxes labeled with vague terms like supplies and equipment. From her time in the military, she recognized the dimensions. These were not ordinary goods. "That's not construction material," she said. "Those crates could be holding anything: cash, weapons, even drugs." Morales reached for his radio. "I'll call for backup. If we can catch them in the act." Before he could finish, a loud crash echoed through the warehouse. One of the workers had dropped a crate, its contents spilling across the floor. Alex's breath caught as she saw what was inside: bundles of cash and small, unmarked packages. Holloway's reaction was immediate. "Get that cleaned up now," he barked. "And hurry it up. We're behind schedule." "Now's our chance," Alex said, her voice urgent. "We can't wait." Morales hesitated for only a moment before nodding. He motioned for Alex to stay close as they moved toward the group. "Police, hands in the air." Morales shouted as he stepped into the open, his weapon drawn. The workers froze, their eyes wide with panic. Holloway, however, didn't flinch. His gaze landed on Alex, and a cruel smile spread across his face. "You just can't stay out of trouble, can you?" he said. "Drop the clipboard and step away," Morales commanded. But Holloway wasn't going to comply easily. With a sharp motion, he signaled to one of the workers, who bolted toward the trucks. Alex reacted instantly, chasing after the man. She caught him just as he reached for the truck's ignition, pulling him back and pinning him to the ground. "Stay down," she hissed, her voice calm but firm. Back inside the warehouse, Morales had managed to cuff two of the workers, but Holloway was still standing, his posture defiant. "You think this changes anything?" he snarled. "Donovan's got people everywhere. You can't touch him." "Maybe," Morales replied, "but we've got you, and that's a start." As more police vehicles pulled up outside, their flashing lights casting long shadows across the warehouse walls, Alex felt a flicker of hope. The team worked quickly to secure the scene, collecting evidence and taking statements from the workers who, under pressure, began to talk. Later, back at the station, Alex, Morales, and Ellie regrouped in a conference room. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving a heavy exhaustion in its place. "That shipment was big," Morales said. "It's enough to get Holloway on serious charges. But Donovan's still insulated. His name doesn't appear on anything we found tonight." "He's smart," Alex said, "but he's not untouchable. We need to lean on Holloway. He knows more than he's saying." Ellie, who had been reviewing photos on her camera, looked up. "We also have to expose this publicly. People need to see what's happening. The more attention we bring to Donovan's operation, the harder it'll be for him to hide." Morales sighed. "That's a double-edged sword. If we go public too soon, Donovan might disappear before we can nail him." "Then we use both strategies," Alex said firmly. "We push Holloway to flip, and we prepare to take this public when the time is right." The following days were a blur of activity. Morales interrogated Holloway, while Alex and Ellie continued digging through the evidence they had gathered. The crates from the warehouse contained more than cash. There were detailed ledgers tracking payments to various groups, including Vanguard Initiative's local chapters. It was a breakthrough, but Alex knew the fight wasn't over. Donovan's influence was far-reaching, and his ability to manipulate the system made him a formidable enemy. Late one evening, Alex sat in her living room, staring at a map of the town spread across her coffee table. Red pins marked the locations of Vanguard Initiative's known activities, and her mind raced with possibilities. Ellie sat across from her, typing furiously on her laptop. "We're making progress," Ellie said, her voice tired but determined. "But it feels like we're still one step behind him." Alex nodded. "That's how people like Donovan operate. They stay in the shadows, letting others take the fall. But shadows don't last forever. Eventually, the light catches up." Ellie glanced at Alex, her expression softening. "You really believe we can win this, don't you?" "I don't believe it," Alex said. "I know it." As the clock ticked toward midnight, Alex felt the weight of the fight ahead. Donovan's network was starting to crack, but the hardest part was yet to come. She wasn't just fighting for herself or Ellie. She was fighting for a community that deserved better, and she wouldn't stop until the battle was won. The cold steel of the precinct's interrogation room was both suffocating and eerily silent. Alex Carter sat across from Mitch Holloway, his hands cuffed in front of him as he leaned back in his chair. His scarred face was twisted into a defiant smirk, but there was an unmistakable tension in his eyes. Holloway had been silent since the raid, offering nothing more than a few crude remarks to Officer Morales, who now stood behind Alex with his arms crossed. Alex placed a folder on the table and opened it slowly, revealing photos of the crates, the cash, and the detailed ledgers they had seized during the raid. She slid one of the photos across the table, her movements deliberate and calm. "Your operation is finished," Alex said, her voice low but firm. "We've got the shipment, the documents, and the witnesses. It's over." Holloway snorted, his smirk widening. "You've got nothing on me. Those boys were sloppy, sure, but I'm just a guy trying to make a living." Alex's gaze didn't waver. A living off fear and intimidation? Off driving families out of their homes so Donovan can sweep in and buy their properties for pennies on the dollar? Holloway's smirk faltered, just slightly, but he recovered quickly. "You think Donovan's gonna fall because of me? You don't get it. He's untouchable." "That's where you're wrong," Alex said, leaning forward. "You think he cares about you? He sent you to do his dirty work while he sat in his penthouse. The second you became a liability, you were disposable. You've seen what happens to people like you in his world. They're left to rot while he walks away clean." Holloway's jaw tightened, and for a moment, Alex thought she saw a flicker of doubt cross his face. Morales stepped forward, his tone sharp. "She's right. Donovan doesn't protect people like you. But if you talk, we can work with the DA to reduce your sentence. You have one chance to save yourself. Don't waste it." Holloway was silent, his eyes darting between Alex and Morales. The second stretched into an unbearable tension, but finally, he sighed heavily and slumped back in his chair. "What do you want to know?" The breakthrough with Holloway was the turning point Alex and Morales needed. Over the next several days, the information he provided painted a damning picture of Blake Donovan's operations. Holloway confirmed that Donovan used shell companies to launder money and fund groups like Vanguard Initiative, not just locally but across multiple states. The money flowed through logistics companies, construction firms, and bogus charities, making it nearly impossible to track without insider knowledge. "He coordinates through a tight circle," Holloway had said during his confession. "Only a few of us ever get direct orders. The rest comes through middlemen, and most of them don't even know who they're working for." Holloway also revealed the existence of a secure location, a private office where Donovan kept sensitive records. The office was in a sleek, modern building downtown, disguised as a real estate firm. "If you're looking for the smoking gun," Holloway had said, "that's where you'll find it." On the night of the raid, the tension in the air was palpable. Alex joined Morales and a team of officers outside Donovan's office building. The tall glass structure gleamed in the city's lights, a symbol of wealth and power that belied the corruption it concealed. "This is it," Morales said as he adjusted his bulletproof vest. "We go in fast and secure the premises. No mistakes." Alex nodded, her nerves steady despite the gravity of the situation. She knew the risks, but she also knew they couldn't let this opportunity slip away. Ellie was nearby in a surveillance van, ready to document everything for her story. The team entered the building swiftly, using a warrant to gain access. They split into groups, clearing the floors methodically until they reached Donovan's private office on the top floor. Alex was among the first to enter, her eyes scanning the space. The office was as opulent as Alex had expected, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. A large mahogany desk dominated the room, and behind it was a locked cabinet. Morales motioned for the team to begin searching while Alex approached the desk. She opened a drawer and found a ledger filled with names, amounts, and transactions. It was all there, proof of Donovan's payments to Vanguard Initiative and other extremist groups. She flipped through the pages, her heart pounding as she realized the scale of the operation. "Got it," one of the officers called out as they pried open the locked cabinet. Inside were more ledgers, stacks of cash, and a flash drive. Morales took the drive and handed it to Alex. "This might be the key to everything," he said. Before Alex could respond, a voice from the doorway made them all freeze. You really think you've won? Blake Donovan stood there, flanked by two men in suits. His calm demeanor and tailored suit made him look every bit the untouchable figure he had always claimed to be. But Alex could see the tension in his jaw, the slight twitch in his hand. "It's over, Donovan," Morales said, stepping forward. "We have everything we need to bring you down." Donovan's lips curled into a sneer. "Do you? Or do you have a bunch of circumstantial evidence that'll fall apart in court?" Alex held up the ledger. "This doesn't look circumstantial to me. And your boy Holloway gave us plenty to work with." Donovan's sneer faded, replaced by cold anger. "You're making a mistake. You don't understand how things work. People like me don't go to prison. I'll be out before you know it, and when I am—" "You'll do nothing," Alex interrupted, her voice sharp. "Because we're not just taking you down. We're dismantling everything you've built." The officers moved in to arrest Donovan, his protests growing louder as they cuffed him. Alex watched as he was led out of the office, his veneer of control crumbling with each step. The aftermath of the raid was a whirlwind. The evidence collected from Donovan's office was overwhelming, tying him directly to hate crimes, financial fraud, and organized harassment. The media swarmed the precinct, and Ellie's reporting brought national attention to the case. In the days that followed, Alex worked tirelessly with Morales and the DA's office to prepare for Donovan's trial. She knew it wouldn't be easy. Donovan's legal team was formidable, and his connections ran deep. But for the first time, Alex felt like they had a real chance at justice. One evening, as she sat in her living room reviewing case files, Ellie arrived with a bottle of wine and a smile. "You did it," Ellie said, setting the bottle on the table. "We're one step closer to taking him down." Alex nodded, her expression serious. "It's a start, but we're not done yet." Ellie sat beside her, her tone softening. "You've done more than anyone else ever has. No matter what happens, you've made a difference." Alex allowed herself a small smile. For the first time in weeks, she felt the weight of the fight beginning to lift. But she knew the battle wasn't over. Donovan was only part of the problem, and there were others like him waiting to take his place. As the night wore on, Alex and Ellie talked about what came next. They didn't have all the answers, but they knew one thing for certain. They wouldn't stop fighting until justice was served. The raid had exposed the truth, and now it was time to bring it into the light. The courtroom buzzed with quiet tension as people filed into their seats. Sunlight streamed through high windows, casting long shadows across the polished wood floor. Alex Carter sat in the back row, her posture straight and her eyes fixed on the defense table where Blake Donovan sat with his legal team. His calm demeanor and immaculate suit were a stark contrast to the chaos his actions had caused. Ellie Nguyen sat beside Alex, her notepad balanced on her knee and her pen poised to capture every word. "This is it," Ellie whispered. "If the jury does its job, Donovan's empire crumbles." Alex nodded but said nothing. She had learned to temper her hope, knowing that men like Donovan didn't go down easily. His lawyers were some of the best money could buy, and they had already spent weeks attempting to discredit the prosecution's case. At the front of the courtroom, the prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Samantha Grayson, stood confidently. Her opening statement had been devastating, weaving together the evidence Alex, Morales, and Ellie had worked so hard to uncover. "Blake Donovan is not just a businessman," Grayson had said. "He is the architect of a network that thrives on fear and intimidation. Through financial manipulation and calculated violence, he has torn apart communities for profit. And today, you have the power to hold him accountable." The trial was grueling. For weeks, witnesses testified, including Alex, who described her confrontation with Vanguard Initiative in the park and her role in uncovering Donovan's operation. Holloway's testimony was another critical piece, though the defense hammered at his credibility, highlighting his criminal record and plea deal. "You're telling this jury to trust a man who has spent years breaking the law," Donovan's lead attorney sneered during cross-examination. "How convenient that he now claims to have seen the light." Holloway, visibly nervous, held his ground. "I didn't have to say anything," he replied. "But I'm telling the truth because people deserve to know what Donovan's done." Despite the defense's aggressive tactics, the prosecution methodically laid out its case. They presented financial records showing money funneled through shell companies to extremist groups, intercepted communications outlining harassment campaigns, and property transactions that lined Donovan's pockets while displacing vulnerable families. During breaks, Alex often found herself pacing the courthouse halls, the weight of the trial pressing down on her. One afternoon, Morales joined her, handing over a cup of coffee. "You've done a lot to get us here," Morales said, his tone reassuring. Alex took a sip and stared out the window. "It doesn't feel like enough. Men like Donovan always seem to find a way out." "Not this time," Morales said firmly. "We have the evidence, and you made sure we got it." Alex nodded, but remained silent. She had learned long ago that victory wasn't guaranteed, no matter how righteous the cause. The closing arguments came swiftly. Donovan's defense team painted him as a misunderstood entrepreneur, arguing that the prosecution had built their case on circumstantial evidence and the word of criminals desperate to save themselves. When Grayson stood for her rebuttal, her voice was steady and unyielding. "Blake Donovan built an empire on the suffering of others," she said, her gaze sweeping across the jury. "He may wear a suit and speak with polished words, but make no mistake. His actions are no less violent than those of the men he hired to do his bidding. This trial is about justice, not just for those he hurt, but for the communities he tried to destroy. Do not let his wealth and power shield him from accountability." The jury deliberated for 3 days. Each hour felt like an eternity, and Alex could barely sleep, her mind replaying every moment of the trial. Ellie stayed by her side, offering quiet reassurance, but even she seemed weighed down by the uncertainty. When the announcement finally came that the jury had reached a verdict, Alex's heart pounded as she walked into the packed courtroom. Donovan sat at the defense table, his expression unreadable. The foreman stood, holding a slip of paper, and handed it to the judge. "On the charge of conspiracy to commit hate crimes, we find the defendant Blake Donovan guilty. On the charge of money laundering, we find the defendant Blake Donovan guilty. On the charge of organizing and funding criminal activity, we find the defendant Blake Donovan guilty." The words echoed in Alex's ears, and for a moment, she felt the weight of the past few months lift ever so slightly. Around her, a murmur of relief spread through the courtroom. Donovan's composure cracked, his jaw tightening as he whispered furiously to his lawyers. The judge announced that sentencing would take place in 2 weeks, but Alex already knew the outcome. With the severity of the charges, Donovan would likely spend the rest of his life behind bars. Outside the courthouse, the air felt lighter. Reporters swarmed the steps, shouting questions as Alex and Ellie made their way through the crowd. Morales caught up to them, his expression a mix of exhaustion and satisfaction. "You did it," he said simply. "We did it," Alex replied. Ellie turned to Alex, her eyes shining with pride. "This story is going to make waves. People need to see that justice is possible, even against men like Donovan." Alex nodded, though her thoughts were already shifting. Donovan's conviction was a victory, but it wasn't the end. There were others like him, people who used power and money to harm others while staying above the law. That evening, Alex returned to Greenstone Park. She sat on the same bench where the confrontation with Vanguard Initiative had begun, the memory of that day still vivid. But now, the park was quiet and peaceful. Children played on the swings, and families strolled along the paths. Ellie joined her, a cup of coffee in hand. "You're thinking about what comes next, aren't you?" she asked. Alex smiled faintly. "There's always more to do. But for now, I'm just trying to enjoy this moment." Ellie nodded. "You deserve it. What you did, it mattered." Alex looked out at the park, her heart lighter than it had been in months. She knew the fight for justice would never truly end, but today, they had taken a step forward. And for now, that was enough. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the park in a warm golden light, Alex allowed herself to breathe. The battle against Blake Donovan was over, but her mission was just beginning. She had seen the power of standing up to injustice, and she wasn't about to stop now.